And the video starts now.
Up to this point, our programs have been fairly linear, or like one step after the other going in a straight line. And we can branch, which just allows us to go straight in like a different direction. But now, what if we want to like go back and do something again? Well, that is done with a loop. So loops allow us to do some section of code as many times as we would like. And by the way, I want to throw out there that, you know, if you're enjoying this series, but you would like to get the crash course version, be sure to check out the description in the description below. Did I just say that? The link in the description below. That's going to give you everything you need to know in a reasonable length of time, and yeah, that's going to be great if you need to study or prepare for a job, so be sure to check that out. You can get all the notes and the crash course. Okay, so this video we're going to be talking about loops. Now loops, they are dangerous because you can create what's known as an infinite loop, where you basically just execute the same line of code over and over and over again until your computer explodes, which is what we don't want to do, right? So we have to be very careful in how we structure our loops. There are three things you need to consider when making a loop. And then we're going to be talking about the different types of loops, and then in the upcoming videos we're going to be doing hands-on with these loops so you can get some practice making them. So the very first thing is the initialization. The next thing is the comparison. And then the update. And one of my computer science teachers explained that I could remember this ICU, which I don't know if that's going to help anybody or not, but it works. So what exactly does this mean? So when we want to do a loop, we need to figure out when we're going to start and stop the loop, right? So like, let's say we want to execute something a certain number of times, we need to say when we're going to stop. So the first thing we do is we set the value of some variable to a number, like let's say I equals 0. That is initializing, because we're saying, hey, I is 0. We initialize the variable, and if this doesn't make any sense, just wait, it will. I is 0, and then we want to increase I until we get to I is less than or equal to 10, for example. So this is the comparison, and then the update is I++. So here are all of the pieces. We start at 0, we're going to keep doing the same thing until I is less than or equal, or while I is less than or equal to 10, and then every time we do it, we're going to increase I one time. So you can see how this makes a loop. We say where we're starting, how we know if we're continuing, and what we're going to do after each time so we get closer to finishing. So these are the three pieces, and it can be a little bit confusing at first, but once we go into the next videos, we're going to be talking about the for loop. You're going to be able to visualize all this very simply and create a simple loop. There are also two other loops, which is the while loop and do while loop, which what all of these have in common is they all need these three things to not create an infinite loop. So guys, go check out the upcoming videos because we're going to be breaking down loops and making them very simple. So far we've talked about if statements, switch statements, and ternary operators. All of that is very important, but that doesn't allow us to create complex applications. Because for example, if we wanted to make a menu that asks users what they want to do, and we want to be able to do this forever because they can use the application as long as they want, we need some sort of looping system. So go check it out. Thank you guys. Hopefully this video just helped you understand the 3 points of loops. Once again, just to repeat, we start somewhere and then we increase some number until this condition is no longer true. You can think of it like going around a race car track. We start with 0 laps. Every time we go around, we increase our number of laps, and we stop when we get 10 laps. So as long as it's less than 10, we keep driving. So thank you guys. Hopefully that was helpful. Please be sure to subscribe. Definitely helps me out, and I appreciate every time someone subscribes. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.
Okay.
First we have ground.
Today we are going to be talking about for loops. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick interruption by our wonderful sponsor, me. This video was sponsored by my C programming crash course, which you guys can check out in the description below. It'll give you everything you need to know in a reasonable time frame. So it's cool. Okay, so back to the point of this video, which is for loops. Okay, so in the previous video we talked about loops in general, and we described the three pieces of these loops, which is the initialization, the comparison, and the update. Now, the for loop allows us to very easily see this in code. That's why I recommend starting with the for loop versus the while loop or the do while loop, which we'll talk about in upcoming videos. So let's just write out a simple for loop that's going to execute some code 10 times. 10 times. Okay. So you start with the keyword for. Then you just follow that pattern. The first thing is the initialization. So you can actually create a variable in here. Typically it's known as I, and partially you can think of it as an iterator, because every single time we go through this loop, it's called an iteration. So each iteration, we can keep track of what iteration we're on using this variable I. And we'll see what that means.
Checking lang Are you aware of what iteration means? Or iteration?
Yes po.
Ano yan?
Ang repetition po ng isang ng parang past, yung pagkakaalam ko doon, parang return po siya, returns to past, tas ulitin po yung nangyari, ganun po yung pagkakaintindi ko sa iteration.
Okay. So yung iteration is keeping track of the changes, no? Pag sumama kayo sa isang, halimbawa nagtrabaho na kayo, no? Meron kayong project manager, tapos nag-i-scrum yung yung project manager nyo, meaning yun yung ginagamit na tool para ma-create yung project. So, kinikip track nila yung iteration, no? Kasi minsan pag merong kinu-code, meron kasing dalawang klase ng project management ng software, no? Meron tayong tinatawag na waterfall or yung standard, at saka yung mga scrum. Yung scrum, kaya kinikip yung iteration kasi mabilisan. Hindi katulad nung standard, sumusunod siya sa SDLC, no? So yung magpaplano muna, magtatanong, i-analyze ng analyst, magagawa ng flowchart, so yung ganun, saka magko-code. Sa Scrum, okay, code agad, tapos ipapakita dun sa gagamit, tapos sasabihin niya kung may changes, ayan, tapos ibabalik. So kaya kinikip yung changes. Ang tawag doon, iteration, yung mga iteration, yung mga changes, no? So naka-track lahat. So may ka doon, may point ka doon sa sinabi mo. Pero to be precise, it's a way of keeping track yung mga changes, no, yung iterations. Lalo na kung Scrum yung ginagawa kasi mabilisan, no. Kumbaga hindi katulad ng waterfall, no, very standard, no. You follow the procedure, step 1, step 2, step 3 bago ka mag-code. Yan. So, yeah, para aware lang kayo. Naririnig nyo kasi yung iteration.
In just a second. But for now, just know it's typically called I if it's something very simple, but you can use anything in these for loops. And my camera, you better not go out of get in focus right now. Oh, see, I don't use manual focus because then what happens is my video is out of focus the entire time because I literally am terrible at camera work and I can never get it right. So if you guys got some tips, leave them in the comments. Anyways, first thing, initialization. Int I equals 0. And we end it with a semicolon. Then we do the comparison. While I is less than or equal to 10, and then we do the update, which is usually something like I++. So you can visually see the 3 points. The first thing, the initialization, comparison, update. Then you have curly braces, and this defines what's going to happen 10 times. And this here is what determines how many times we want to loop. So as long as this is true, it's going to execute. So we can put our code in here, and we can kind of just go through how this works. Very first thing is the initialization, and it only happens once. So we set the value of I to 0. Alright, I put it on manual focus because it's driving me crazy. Okay, so the next thing is the comparison. If this evaluates to true, we execute this section. So this actually happens after this. So we execute all this code, and then we increment I. And after every time, this is going to increment. And after every loop, we then do another comparison. So we start here, initialization, comparison, loop, update, comparison. And we repeat that until this is evaluated as false. Once it's evaluated as false, we proceed down past the loop. Simple as that. Now, the variable I can be used to basically go through arrays or to change what's being executed in this code. So for example, we can print the value of I. And since the value of I is being increased every time, we can use this to count. So if we printed this out, it would print 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 9. 10 times starting at 0. If you wanted to do it from 1 to 10, you could just print I plus 1. And you can do all kinds of things. For example, if you have an array, well, you can access the index using I, and that will allow you to iterate through arrays. So, very cool. Next video, we're going to get hands-on with this for loop and create one of our own. So be sure to check that out. Thank you guys for watching. And yeah, sorry if my camera has been a butt munch. Be sure to subscribe. Peace.
First we have...
Hey guys, welcome back. This video we're going to be talking about for loops. So, a for loop is just a really easy way to loop through code a specific number of times. And all loops, like I said in the previous videos, are going to need an initialization. By the way, we're in a new program, loop.c, and you can follow along. It's going to need a comparison, and it's going to need an update. And this is very easily seen with a for loop. So the way a for loop it looks is like this. And this first thing here is we're declaring basically a variable to increment as we go through the application. Now, I think, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure in order to declare the variable within the for loop, you need to be on the newest version of C. So if you need to basically get around that, you can just declare it up here and then say I equals 0. But for me it works, so I'm just going to do int I equals 0, and that is our iterator. The next thing what we're going to do is we're going to do a comparison. So this is how many times you want to loop. And I'm going to do this as long as I is less than 10. Lastly, we need to have an update, and typically you'll see something like I++. Inside the body of this for loop, we can do whatever we want. Typically, I will be used within this for loop. Not all of the time, but often. So in this case, we could say, we could just print I. How about that? Now let's execute this and see how it goes. Okay. Something, moron. I did them backwards. Okay, 0 through 9. So it printed 10 numbers, starting with 0 all the way up to 9. And you can change this by altering the start and the end, but typically I like to keep it in this structure where the first one equals a value and then the next one is less than a value. You can also do less than or equal to 10, like for example if you want to go all the way up to 10 and include it. Let me compile first. That's going to print out 11 values including 0. And if you want to get rid of that first one, you can just increase the starting value. And you can see now it starts at 1 and goes up to 10. there's different ways you can write these, and the most important thing is just to be really careful with the starting and the ending. Like I've talked about in other videos, edge cases are usually where programs break. So if, for example, you're working with a string or an array, and let's say there's 10 elements and you're starting at 0, I don't know if we've talked about arrays yet, but basically if you're going too far past just one past the end of the array, you're going to access an area of memory that you're not allowed to access. So just for consistency and for my sanity, whenever possible, I always try to keep this side on the less than, and this one just stays normal, so I can change this however I want. If I want to go from 1 to 9, it would look like that. If I want to go from 0 to 9, it would look like that. And the main thing is just consistency. If you truly understand the beginning and the end, then it's a lot easier, but I always find myself getting a little lost, and then I'll usually have to do stuff like try adding an equal sign, or trying increasing this one. And as you get better, it becomes easier. Now I usually don't have any problems, but I'm not going to promise and say that I never have problems, especially when I'm using variables. Which, speaking of variables, it's very easy to get this value from a user. You can just do it like we normally do. So we can say the max value, and we can get that from scanf. And then instead of comparing to max, or to 10, we can compare it to max. Okay, yeah, I gotta put this in a string, obviously. Okay. And then we can put in a value, 500. Or I only put 50, sorry. And it goes from 0 to 49. If we wanted to go from 1 to 50, like I said, just increases to 1, max plus 1. See, that's what I do. I put plus 1 instead of comparing less than or equal to. I always keep it on the less than and just change the value over here. That is personal preference. You can do whatever you want. Now it's going to print from 1 all the way up to 50. So that's pretty cool, and I think that kind of covers everything we need to go over with the for loops. The main thing is that just be careful with the edge cases, and also know that once you get into some like while loops, for example, they're still going to have these same 3 things. It's just going to be positioned a little bit differently. I like to use for loops when I'm aware of what the max value is, and I typically use while loops when I just want to do it indefinitely until someone stops it. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully that gives you enough information to get going with for loops, and I'll check out the next video.
Okay. Ito na yung
Hey guys, welcome back. This video I wanted to talk about more on the for loop. So we introduced it in the previous videos, we talked about how to code it, and we made this nice pretty for loop. But the reality is this is not the structure of the for loop you're always going to find in the wild. So I just wanted to help you understand for loops at a more deep level, and hopefully that will help you write them better as well as understand them better. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to run this program so you guys can see what the output is. Okay, so it takes an input, and let's say we say 10. It prints out 10 numbers from 0 to 9. And what I want to do is I want to append to this program and basically say, hey, you printed blank numbers, and then use the I variable to say how many numbers were printed. So to do something like that, it's going to look like this. So you print it up to the number D, and you can see that we're printing the value of I, and it goes up to 9. So in theory, this should make sense, but we're going to find some issues with this. And the variable we're going to use I. And I can tell you right now that this is not going to compile. And the reason this is not compiling is because we are referencing this variable I. And this has to do with variable scope, but we're declaring this variable inside of this for loop. So once the end of this for loop is hit and we go outside of it, all of the variables declared up here and inside of the body, they all disappear and they're no longer able to be referenced. Thus, in order to fix this, we must declare I outside of the for loop. So we could do something like this, int I, and get rid of the declaration inside of here. You could also say int I equals 0, and then just get rid of this altogether. But personally, I don't think that's quite as clear. I like it like this, because to me, it makes it clear, you know, what we're doing. We're starting I from 0, and we're going to max. So definitely clearer in my opinion. Now let's try compiling. Maybe. Oh, yeah. It's waiting for me. Oh, boy. It's been a long day. 10. Okay. So it counts from 0 to 9, and then it says you printed up to the number 10. So why is it printing 10? Well, just so you guys understand that the update happens after the body. Thus, on the last iteration, it prints 9, and then I is incremented to 10. So at this point, I is 10, not 9. So if you want to reference the last value of I with the for loop, you need to make sure you're doing I minus 1. That's the first thing I wanted to show you guys. Pretty simple and nothing too crazy, but just wanted to make it clear. You printed up to the number 9. Now, if you're trying to print the total of number of things printed, that's different. So you could say you printed %d numbers. In this situation, we don't want to use the -1 because it will actually have the right value. You printed 10 numbers. Perfect. So that is the first thing I wanted to show you. The other thing is that this for loop increments. It doesn't have to work this way. We can actually flip it around and decrement, so count down. So what is that going to look like? Let me just get rid of this. So we're going to basically, let's first look at the comparison, because I like to think of, you know, when are we going to stop? So as long as I is greater than, let's say 0, and instead of using I, let's say the max. So we're going to start with the max, and then we're going to decrement the max. And this comes from input. So the person passes in a max, and as long as it's greater than 0, we're going to decrement that value. Let's compile this and run it. And obviously we did something terribly wrong. And why? It's because we're printing I, which is not what we're trying to do here. And in fact, I was never initialized, which is why we're getting some random value. We're just declaring it. Thus, there's no prediction on what is actually going to show up here. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to print max. And you could use a variable I just the same. I already had a variable max, so it was easier for me to read. Let me get out of that. Compile. Now let's try 10. And it goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that is how you could count down. Another thing you could try doing is, and we don't need this I variable anymore, you could count down by 2. So for example, instead of decrementing, you could say max equals max minus 2. Now it goes 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. Awesome. If you wanted to include 0, you could put that equal sign there. And there you go, include 0. So another thing I wanted to warn you guys of is infinite loops. They're actually very easy to do, and it usually just comes down to you don't really think about all the possible inputs, because naturally we're human, we only think about the things we're thinking about, but we don't think the same way as everybody else. So when someone else uses our program, they think things differently and they put in a different input. So for example, you might look at this and say, wow, this is counting all the even numbers. It's counting down by 2.
Thus, instead of naturally thinking this, we might just say, hey, as long as max is not equal to 0, we should be good. And once it hits 0, it's going to stop. Let's run it. Put in the value 10. Yep, works perfectly. 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. Exactly what we want. And then what we might do is we might ship this application to millions of users and say that it's production ready. But what we don't think about is that, they might not put in an even number. If you put in the value 11, it's going to subtract 2, and it's going to skip the value 0, and it's going to continue to get less and less and less into the negatives, and it's just going to keep doing that forever. Obviously, that is a big bug, and it's going to not let you proceed with your application. So let's just try that. Let's just run it. Let's put in 11. And now it's basically just counting down forever. It's kind of cool if you think about it. Kind of makes you look like you're like a super hacker. You're just like, just type on your keyboard like as if you know what you're doing, but you really don't. So if you want to get out of this, you can hold the control key and press C. That's what I have to type on my Mac. If you're on Windows or something, it might be a little bit different. I'm not entirely sure, honestly. So if you're in that scenario and you can't get out of it, I'm sorry. That's all I got for you guys for some more advanced for loops. Hopefully it was some useful information, and be sure to check out the description for a link to my C programming crash course.
Okay. Right. So gusto ko yung batang yan, ang kulit niyang mag-explain. Tsaka yung yung coding niya, straightforward, no? Nile-layout niya na, sinabi niya, kailangan ng ICU, no? Di ba, matatandaan mo ngayon, no? Anong kailangan mo gawin? Initialize, may comparison, at saka may update. O, di ba? Okay. So, let's try practicing. May iniwan ba ako sa inyo na gagawin? Tapos ngayon, ipapasa? Tama? Tama ba? Meron ba akong iniwan?
Wala po ata.
Wala po, ma'am.
Wala. So, ibig sabihin sa ibang klase yun. Ang galing. Swerte naman ng mga to. Hindi ko kayo giniwan ng gagawin. Okay. So, dito tayo. No? So, ito yung mga collection ng practice ng ng loop. Ayan. So, let's try number 5. Are you seeing my screen? W3 resource. Yung ba yung nakikita nyo? Class?
Opo, ma'am.
Okay. Alright. So, yung program sample natin, number 5, write a program in C to display the cube of the number up to given an integer. No? So, ang test data natin ay 5. Ang expected output, the number 1, and the cube of 1 is 1. Number is 2. The cube is 2 is 8. Ayan. So, ito yung ating mga expected output. So, maglalagay tayo ng input terms, no? Para makuha natin tong ating expected output, no? Okay. So, tingnan natin yung solution. Okay. So, ito ay gumamit ng for loop. Ayan. So, titingnan natin. Ang kailangan ay makita yung cube of number up to a given integer. So, ito yung kanyang pictorial representation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, a cube of yung 1. Ilang beses? 1 plus 1 plus hindi, times pala. 1 times 1 times 1, 1 pa rin. 2 times 2, 4. 4 times 2, 8. Ayan, ganun yun, no? Ayan. So, 3 times 3, 9. 9 times 3, 27. 4 times 4. 4 times 4, 16. Tama, no? 16. 16 times 4. Ayan, tatlo lang naman yan. So, 64. And then, yung 5. 5 times 5, 25. 25 times 5, 125. Ayan. Okay. So, yun yung pictorial representation niya. So, ito yung code natin. Simple lang yung code, no? Ito yung muna yung flowchart, no? Int is equal to I, tapos CTR. Yan yung ating mga variables. Printf. So, ilalabas, ipiprint yung input terms, input number of terms. Scanf, %D, yan yung result. I is equal to 1. So, ito yung ating comparison. So, dito sa, taas, nakita nyo, initialize yung I equal to 1, and then yung comparison, and then dito yung mag-end siya, no? Ayan, mag-end siya pag na-achieve na yung I is less than or equal to CTR. Ayan. So, meron tayong input terms para mailagay natin yung yung ating gustong lumabas na numbers, no? So, input term is 5. Ito yung code, no? Simple lang yung code, no? So, include stdio, void yung ginamit niya, and then main. So, ito yung ating mga variables, int, I, and ctr. Ito na nga yung print. Scanf. So, ito yung mga result. Ito yung nag-initialize, nag-compare. Okay? And then, ito yung ending.
Sasayin ka ba?
Hindi. Hindi. Ano yun? May niluluto ako. Nagulat naman ako. Wala. May niluluto ako. Okay. So, ito yung ating for na loop na statement. And then, printf, number is equal to %d, and cube of %d is %d /n I. No? Kasi I yung ating pinaka-variable, no? Siya yung mag-e-end ng loop, no? Pag inabot niya na tong I is less than or equal to CTR. Okay? Okay. So, gawin natin siya sa copy devc. Aha, tumunog ang ligoog ko. Okay. Ano nga ito? For loop na cube. Okay. So, save natin. Okay. Hindi pa. See? Cube. For loop. Cube for loop save. Ayan. So, ano nga yung input natin? 5. Correct, no? Ayan. 5. Ayun. Okay. Tingnan nyo nga, i-compare natin kung tama. Dito tayo. Tapos, nasa na yun? Okay. Ayan. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 8, 27, 64, 25. Okay. 1, 2, 5. So, yan. Yan yung ating example. Okay. So, tamama naman siya. Okay. So, tingin tayo ng inyong gagawing practice. Okay. Practice.
Sis po, may nag-join po.
Okay. Sorry. Saan? Ayan. Admit. Si Shiana. Ayan. Okay. Shiana. Magpo-program na tayo. Hindi ka nakapag-review. Okay. So, pili tayo. Eto, number 8. No? Parang gusto ko tong number 8. Okay. So, here's what you do. Okay. Ilalagay ko tong sample ng program. Copy. Para may idea tayo. 1, 2, and kayo, diba? Tama? Yes. Section nyo yun. Magot naman kayo! Hello! Ano ba? Tanghali ba? Alas 3? Naantok ba kayo? Oh, hindi kayo antokin ngayon kasi gagawa tayo ng for loop. Huwag niyo lang gagawing pangalan ito, infinite. No? Masakit sa ulo. Natandaan nyo ba, pagka nakagawa kayo ng infinite loop, ano yung ipe-press? Sinabi ni Caleb. Naalala nyo ba? Anong Control? Control Ayan.
Si po.
Control C. Okay. So, mag-e-end siya doon. Okay. So, tandaan nyo yan in case na magkaroon kayo ng issues sa loop. Okay. So, nilagay ko na yung sample kanina, yung cube. Okay. So, dito tayo. Ito yung gagawin natin. Ayan. So, you will, number 8, write a program in C to display the n terms of odd natural number and their sum. Okay. Ang test data natin, yung input number is 10. So, ang expected output, the odd numbers are 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, hanggang 19. No? The sum of odd natural number up to 10 terms is 100. Ayan. Okay? Sige. Ilalagay ko lang. Copy. Ilalagay ko dito. Siya, gawa na. Gawa na. Ayan.
Ma'am, done na po.
Done na? Bilis Bilis. Okay. Sino yung nakatapos na?
Ako po, ma'am.
Mark? Pa ba yan? Si Yuri. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. Sige, Yuri, ha? Sandali, ha? Tingnan ko lang may nag-comment. Si Yuri pala yung nagsabi kanina. Okay. Ma'am, tanong lang po sa documentation ng project. Flowchart lang po ba ang gagawin? Yan. Okay. So, bago natin simulan yung pagpapakita ng ating natapos, yung sa project, yung sa documentation, ano nga ulit ang kailangan nyo? Kailangan nyo ng flowchart. Okay. Flowchart. Tapos, yung instruction manual. Yan, yung steps kung paano gamitin yung inyong program. Yan. Ano ba yan? Nakikita ko ba yung ginagawa ko? Tama ba yung mga pinagsusulat ko? Siyempre, wala daw akong salamin. Ayan. O, diba? Luminaw. And the last one is your code. Yung code nyo nakalagay sa notepad para hindi active. Baka kasi pag ginawa nyo maging exe file, no?
Ma'am, nakapag-check na po ba kayo nung mga nag-send po sa email?
Actually, maraming nagsesend. Kasi submission ngayon eh. Nakikita ko lang, hindi ko pa binubuksan. Yan.
Kasi po yung sa akin po pala nagloko po siya, hindi po na-send yung ibang naka-attach po doon sa...
Meron ngang si Dayan. Hindi ko alam kung dito si Dayan. Dayan, dito ka ba? Wala. Yung sined niya sa email niya, papunta sa akin. Tinulungan ko na nga siya eh. Hindi pa rin lumilitaw. So, may issue. Okay, so, nakikita niyo ba yung screen? Ito yung mga nagsasubmit. Medyo madami kasi yung marami akong hawak na estudyante. And, submission time siya. So, sino yung mga nagsubmit na? Pakita ko lang sa inyo yung aking inbox para may idea kayo. Na, pagka ganyan, ang itsura, hindi ko pa yan nabubuksan, no? Ayan. Kilala niyo ba yung mga yan? Ayan. Okay. JC Del Rosario. Ayan. So, medyo madami. Ang inbox ko nasa 130 na. Dati 0, wala akong Ayan. Ngayon, nagpapatong-patong na. So, anong gusto mong gawin? Uulitin mo ba?
Opo, sana ma'am. Ulitin po yung pag-send po.
Wala pa naman tayo sa deadline. So, okay lang.
Thank
Lagyan
you
mo
po.
na lang ng, pag nag-send ka, lagay mo, revision, no? Revision.
Apo. Sige po.
Para-
Thank you po.
Para matitrace ko yung iteration ng ano mo, ng project mo. No? Okay. Okay. So, balik tayo dun sa ating gagawin. Ito. Okay. So, ano ba? Magpapakita na ba tayo ng ating mga nagawa? Sige. Marami na bang nag-comment? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Dan na rin po. Dan na. So, mauna si Yuri, ha? Siya yung naunang nag-react. Siya yung makukuha na ng 10 points. O, diba? Teka lang. Right. Mag-comment kayo, ha? Para mapakita niyo yung mga gawa niyo. No? Sino nga yung nagtanong about the documentation? Si James. James, nasagot ba yung tanong mo?
Opo.
Okay, mali.
Thank you po.
Okay. O, sisimulan na natin yung magpakita ng gawa, ha? Para pagkatapos nito, isa pa, and then lilipat tayo sa array. Array ko. Okay, medyo madugo kasi yung array, kaya array ko. Okay, Yuri. Your turn. Pagtapos na kayo, maglagay kayo ng comment dyan na done. Ganun lang, para tatawagin ko kayo. And so, dahil nauna si Yuri,
Ma'am, kita na po.
Yuri, you will get 10 points.
Hello po, ma'am. Kita na po.
Yes, I'm looking at it. Nasaan yung aking ballpen? Nandito lang yan, oh. Okay, sige. Right. F. So, ilan yung lines of code mo? Baba mo nga.
19 po.
20. De, 20 kasama yung yung closing na curly brace. Ayan. Okay.
Pwede lang po, fix yun.
Iran mo nga. Ayun. Alright. Nakuha niya. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you po.
Okay, good job. Sige, next. Si JB. Ay, naka-record naman pala yung ating discussion. Kaya okay lang. Sige. JB. Share. Ayan na si JB.
Kita na po.
Tingnan muna natin yung lines of code mo kung ilan. So,
14 lang po.
14. Okay, maiksi siya. Sige nga, run mo. 10.
Ano?
Ayun. Visual code. Tama?
Opo.
Yung manipis ng Visual Studio. Okay. Salamat, JB. Next, Jalaine.
Hello po. Ito po.
17 yung lines of code niya. Then,
Wait lang.
and then, 5, 17. Bakit kulang ata, hindi 19?
Ay, 19 po ba yun? Sige po, wait lang po. Check ko po.
Malinaw ang mata ni Miss Peng. Nakita ko yun eh. Teka, saan yung ating... Ayan, no? Kulang ka ng 19. Ayan. Okay, so...
Balikan niyo na lang po ako.
Babalikan kita.
Sige po.
Okay. Right. So, next, comment ko yun. John Mark, Mabandos. Mark.
Kita po ba, ma'am?
Ayan na, malapit na.
Okay na po.
Click mo lang. Yan.
Ito po, okay.
Okay. Ilan ang lines of code mo? 16. Okay. Value 10.
And po.
Okay. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 19. So, nilagyan mo ng space.
Opo.
Share mo nga kung paano mo nilagyan ng space. Ipakita mo
Ito
dun
po,
sa
ma'am.
code. Para alam din nila.
Ito pong part na to.
Ayan. Yung %/t. %d/t.
Opo.
Okay.
Thank you po.
Okay. Salamat. And Sandali. Okay, next. Next, si Gerald Palileo. Okay, Gerald, pa-share. Okay, pakita mo. Tayo mo lang ako ang sandali. Pakita mo muna. Tayo mo lang ako magsalita. Tayo mo lang ako kukunin.
Tumatang ba siya dito?
Oh,
Kailan? Kailan tumatang ba siya?
walang basura dito.
So I'll just throw it there.
Ganun yung ginagawa.
Never, never, never.
Never, ever, ever.
So I'll just throw it there.
Hindi, aking ginagawa niya.
Ikaw ba? Ano ginagawa mo?
Dinadala ko sa, dinadala ni Shelby yung basura sa, sa Honduras. Hindi niya tinatapos. Dali, andyan na. Nalagyan ko ginawa ka. Okay. Sige, Gerald. Ulit.
Kita na po.
Malapit na. Inintay ko lang. Click mo nga. Parang kailangan mo lang i-click dun sa icon.
Yung alin po.
Ano ba gamit mo? Doon sa ibaba. Ayan. Lumitaw na. Okay. So, you have 17 lines of code. Ayan. So, input. 10. Okay. Right. Okay, sige. Tanungin natin para alam din ng ibang klase mo. Paano mo ginawa yung pababa? Saan dun sa line of code mo yung pababa?
Una po, naglagay po ako ng \n dito para bumaba po yan.
Para
Tapos
bumaba.
sunod po, dito po, sa may %d, naglagay din po ako ng \n para po
Bumaba siya.
pababa po yung format.
Okay. Okay, ayan, class. Naririnig nyo para aware kayo.
Ma'am, okay na po yung akin.
Sige. Salamat, Gerald. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Okay. O, Jelaine, ikaw uli. Totoo na yan, Jelaine, ha?
Yes po, nagkulang lang po ako ng equal sign. Ito po.
Ayan. O, diba? Tumama ka na rin.
Opo.
Okay, thank you. Right. Next, si Adeline. Adeline Grace. Ibig sabihin, pwede ko nang hirapan yung next. O, ganun din yung kay Adeline. May pababa din siya. Okay, 19. Yung dulo. Salamat, Adeline.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Okay, next, si Melvin Aquino. So, you have 16 lines of code. Okay, sige, run. Then, okay. So, yan, nagawa na yan kanina. Na-explain na yan. No? Add numbers. 19. Okay, salamat. Salamat, Melvin. Next, si James Orcales. Nasaan ba yung pangkamot ko dito? Tinitira ako ng lamok. Ayan. Okay. Nag-ano ka na. So, you have 21 lines of code. Right. Okay. So, yun yung output no sa baba. Alright. Kaya ka lang. 116. 116 ba yun? Hindi Parang hindi ata 116. 100, kuya. 100.
Po?
100.
Ay?
Oo, 116 yung ano mo. Yung nakalagay dun sa'yo. Yan sa baba. Ayan 116.
I see.
Oo, diba? Okay. Siguro dahil nilagyan mo ng bar. Yung bar after Sige nga. Tingnan natin kung paano siya troubleshoot yun.
Pinastart ko po sa variable yung bawat number.
Sige, tingnan mo muna uli ha. Tapos balikan mo kami. Okay. Kasi dapat 100 yan. Ayan. Okay. Okay, babalikan natin si James. Sundan natin ni John Vector, the Jack. Malamig.
Pwede parang iba yung akin mo.
Ayan na. Malapit na. Ayan. So, you have 18 lines of code. Okay. Enter. 25. Kuya!
Bali yung nagawa ko, ma'am, odds number ng hanggang 10 lang.
Oh.
Bali kung gusto ko lumabas na yung 100, ma'am, katulad sa result. 20 ilalagay ko po.
Okay, may
Ayun.
problema dyan sa code mo. Ayusin mo muna, no? So, ayan. Pero yan yung way ng pag output mo. Pero kasi kailangan natin, pag nag-input tayo ng 10, no? Yung 19, hanggang 19 yung add number na lilitaw, no? So, bago mo diskartehan ng sarili mong diskarte, okay, ayos lang sa akin yun, na meron kayong diskarte na sarili dun sa program. Inaano ko nga yun, naging independent kayo. Pero yung natin kasi, meron tayong required na tinetest natin para makita natin na pare-pareho tayo ng output, no? Okay, so babalikan ka namin, John Victor, pakiayos yan. Right. Next, siguro naman madali mong maaayos yan kasi na-explain mo gusto mo 20. Okay. Aljon Banderada. Tapos ka na. Pa-share. Ayan, 19. Okay, tama. So, 100 siya. Alright. Thank you. Thank you, Aljon. Kyla.
Salamat po na.
Okay. Si Kyla, next. Rayola. Okay, so you have 17 lines of code. Okay, nirun mo na ba siya? Okay, nirun na. 10. Alright, 119 and then alright, 10. Salamat, Kyla.
Tapos na po, ma'am. Nagawa ko na.
Sino to? Si The
Dahak
Jack?
po, ma'am.
Sige, ulit. Take 2. Ikaw naman, bago tayo lumipat kay Melody. Okay. 10. Ayun. O, diba? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. The Jack. John Victor. Okay, next. Melody. Tapay. So, meron kang 19 lines of code. Alright. 3, 5, 7, 10. Okay. Salamat, Melody. Good job. Thank you. Next, si Gian. Gian, Ramon, Francisco, you're next. 15. Okay, then. 1, 3, 5, 13, 17, 100. Okay. Alright. Thank you. Thank you, Gian. Next, si Mark Joseph, Alice. Yung lines of code niya. Okay, 10. Okay, 19, 100. So, ginawa niya pababa. Okay, salamat. Salamat, Mark. Next, si Erica Nicole Norte. Mobile. Hindi. Ang input natin is 8. Sige, ulit. Hindi, sorry. Mali ako. Kasi binasa ko yung 8 na nalito tuloy ako. 10. 10 niya. Oh, naloka na ako. Sige. Ayun. Ayan. Tama na. O, diba? Okay. Thank you. O, diba? Yan ang ano. Yan ang buhay programmer kahit sa cellphone, nagko-code. Next, Mark Rances. So, 15 yung lines of code niya. Okay. Pababa din yung style niya. Okay. Salamat, Mark.
Thank you rin po, ma'am.
Alright. Next, si Wilmer Concepcion. Okay. So, 20 yung lines of code niya. Sige, paran. 10. Okay. So, ganyan naman yung style niya. Parang kinulang ka ng space yung sa ano, mula sa 1 at saka 3. Okay lang. Sige. Nakita ko lang, napansin ko lang. Salamat. Salamat, Wilmer. Next, si Mariton.
Thank you po.
Mariton De Paz. Next. Yan. So, naka-visual code siya. Dito sa kabila. Input mo 10. 21 yung lines of code niya. Oh, okay. 19. Alright. So, ganda naman yung style niya. Okay. Salamat. Haba, 21. Yan yung pinakamahaba. Salamat, Mariton. Next, si Rochelle Policarpio. Ayan, Dayan. Andiyan ka pala. Nangyari, hindi ko pa nare-receive yung email. Pwedeng, paano ba natin isa-send yung isa email? Sa ano na lang, bigyan mo na lang ako ng link sa ano, sa Facebook Messenger. Baka doon umubra. Okay. So, 1, 3, 5, 7, 100. Right. Thank you, Rochelle. Alright, next. Si Paulo Belen. $21 Okay, mahaba rin yung lines ng code niya. Okay. 10. Numbers are 19 to 20. Okay, thank you, Paolo. Next, Dayan. Nasaan si Dayan? Ayan. So, naka-mobile si Dayan. Dayan, paano ba yung mangyayari dun sa ano mo, sa project mo? Pwede mo bang i-send na lang yung ano?
Ma'am, baka ibang dayan po yun kasi hindi pa naman po ako nagsisend.
Ah, nako. Oo nga, baka sa kabilang Dayan yun. Okay, akala ko naman ikaw na yun. Sabi ko, anong Dayan na yun? Okay, sige. Run mo yan. 15 yung lines of code. 10. 10. Ulit. Yan. Okay. Yan. Okay. So, ganyan pala pagka sa mobile. No? Di ba mahirap mag-encode pagka ganyan? Di naman.
Okay lang naman po.
Okay lang. Okay. Right. Thank you, Dayan. Next, si Daniel Molina. Ilan yung lines of code mo? 15. Ito yung pinaka-maikse. O, sige, run mo. Taran. 10. Alright. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, salamat, Daniel. Next, si Samuel Ayara. Okay. Sam. $16. And 10. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Samuel. Next, si Edmeline Ibanez. Okay. Linis ah. Okay, thank you. Code blocks yung gamit niya. Next, si Archer Shane Bigornia. Yung lines of code. Wait. Balik mo nga. Close mo kasi. Ayan. Archer! Paano mo ginawang transparent yung ano? Nakikita mo yung sa ilalim. Pansin nyo? Nakita nyo ba, class? Paano yun?
Ganyan na po talaga ganyan. Hindi ko po siya
paano
sinet
nangyari yan? Kasi nakikita natin yung yung code mo sa background eh. Parang anipis nung ano. Wala lang. Naaliw lang ako. Ayan. Okay, thank you. Next, si Isaiah Yodi Akuzar. Akuzar. Taga saan yung mga Akuzar, Isaiah?
Batangas po.
Tangginyo ka pala. Alaki. Ayan. Ayan. Banat. Saan sa Batangas? Laki ng Batangas eh. Sa taas, sa baba.
Hindi ko rin po kasi sure kasi meron din po sa Bataan. Pero yung father side ko po Batangas.
Batangas. Okay. So, yung lines of code mo ay ano yun? Hindi ko makita. 17? Tama ba? Oo, 17. Okay. Run. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Sa pataan kasi yung mga akudsar. Involved sa sugar plantation. Yan. Yun ang alam ko. Next, si Gabriel Saklot. Mahaba rin yung lines of code niya. Okay. So, 10, 1 to 19, 100. Okay. Salamat, Gabriel. Next, si Jaren. Gati ka. Okay.
Kita po, ma'am.
Oh, andyan sa baba. Nakatingin na ako dun sa output mo.
Ito po. Hindi ko na po nalagyan ng clear screen uli.
Yung sa ano?
Okay,
Yung
system CLS.
clear. Iba yung sa ano, diba? Sa visual code.
Yes po. System CLS po.
System CLS. Pagka ano, visual code. Okay, salamat.
Welcome po, ma'am. Ay, ganun po.
Yan. James. Nandiyan ka uli. Sige. Dalawa pala yung Christina sa inyo. Makabalik agad si James. Ayan. O, diba? Naayos mo rin. Now, tatanungin kita, paano mo nilagyan ng bars in between sa numbers?
Sinama ko lang po dito sa printf sa for loop.
So, nag-ano lang siya doon. So, naka-loop din yung ano, yung bar. Hanggang sa ma-achieve yung ano, yung pang-update, no? Tama ba? Tama yun ko dyan. Okay. Alright. Ayan, no? Diba, bawat ano, programmer talaga may kanya-kanyang approach, no? Ayan. Salamat, James. Next. Si Christina Manuson. $19. Then, iba naman ang style nito. May space ka. Paano mo nilagyan ng space in between number? Sige nga. Ayun. Okay. So, ganun daw, class. Yung code niya, sino to? Si Joanne ay papasok. Ayan. N. After ng %D, naglagay siya ng \n. Okay. Salamat. Teka. Ano nangyari? Bakit parang umurong yung aking binabasa? Sino nga yun? Si Christina. Ayan. Next, si Rose Ann Hernan.
Wait lang po.
Sige. Ready mo lang. Nineteen lines of code. And okay. Paano mo ginawang tag doon? Ano ba yun? Fuchsia? Fuchsia, no? Yung color ng background. Paano mo ginawa?
Niniclear ko lang po ng system tapos color po.
Anong number na naka-assign sa color ng fuchsia?
5F po. Color 5F.
Color 5F. Okay. Salamat. Next, Noel Escultero. Input terms. Sige. Then, ayun. Ayan. Tanungin ka namin. Paano mo ginitna? Noel. Anong ginawa mo para gumitna? Ako magsusulat. Okay.
Ano po? Naglagay lang po ako ng ganito.
Ano yan?
\n sa \t po. Tapos
okay.
pati rin po dito sa
Sa ibaba.
baba.
Okay. So, yun yung way. Alright. Thank you. Next. Si Christina Velasco. Siya na yung last. Christina. And then, isa pang practice. Online. Online ka. 15. Okay. Sige. Ulit. Hindi ko nakita. Ayan. 10. Okay. Alright. Thank you. Right. O, isa pa. Ano to? Bakit ano yung babaraw yung aking network stability. Wala namang mga nakakonect na. Teka lang. Okay. Tingin tayo doon sa ating practice ano. Okay. So, tingnan natin yung solution niya. Okay. Number. So, yan yung parang prepositioning niya, no? Okay. So, meron siyang 15 lines of code. Yan yung style naman niya, no? Yung I niya is 1, equal to 1. Ayan. So, meron siyang initialization, comparison, at saka yung update. Okay. Right. Okay. So, try naman natin itong so, yung gagawa ng ano eh. Ito. Write a program in C to make such a pattern like a pyramid with numbers increase by 1. Okay. Tagay natin itong number 13. Tapos, wala tayong encoding, no? Ayan ko nga. Okay, so walang prepared number. Basta ito, pag kinode nyo to, lilitaw na tong 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, no? Diretso to. Okay. So, gawin natin. Ayan yung code. Straightforward lang to. Wala tayong entry ng numbers. Kita nyo ba yung notepad? Class?
Yes, po, ma'am.
Okay. Sige, gawa. Yung gustong mauna, magsalita agad, ha? Meron na bang nakatapos na maaga? Tingnan ko nga. Baka may nagre-react na doon. Wala pa. Teka lang. Kanino tayo meron nang nakatapos. Teka lang. Kanino tayo natapos? Kay
Christina Velasco.
Velasco. Ayun, pinakauna. Si Adeline. Congratulations. Biglang ganun. Siya yung pinakauna. Siya yung nakakuha ng 10 points. Ayan. Lista lang natin bago natin malimutan. Okay. Mag-i-stop presenting na ako, ha. Sige. Adeline. Share. yung lines of code niya. Sige nga. Tingnan natin kung align siya. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ayun. Galing. Salamat, Adeline. Ayan.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Okay. So, tingnan natin, bago yung sumunod yung iba, kung paano yan ginawa doon sa ating Click here for the solution. Ayan. So, display the pattern like a pyramid in numbers increased by 1. Okay. Ayan. So, yung pictorial, niya, ha? Ayan. And then, ito yung code. Meron siyang 19 lines of code. No? So, gawin natin. Copy natin. Ay, nako. Copy. Dito tayo. Ano nga to? Loop. Dagdagan ko kaya, gawin nating 9. Ayun. So, mas mahaba. Okay. Okay. So, meron tayong input. Depende kung gaano kalaki yung gusto mong pagawin. Right. So, next. Ito tayo sa mga kaklase ninyo. Nakita nyo ba yon? Hindi. Hindi nyo nakita, no?
Hindi po, ma'am.
Kaloka. Si ma'am talaga, nag-share na naman ng wala sa loob niya. Ayan. Okay. Ito yun, no? So, Devc. Ayan. So, yun yung code. So, 20 lines of code. Kinapi ko lang siya dyan. Ito yung output niya. Ang in-encode ko ay 9. Para makita kung gaano ka no. Hindi siya ganun ka-precise pag lumampas na doon sa Hindi na project yung dalawang number. Nagdalawang number. Kasi hindi siya align, no? Ayan. Okay. Right. Okay, balik tayo. Ayan. So, ang susunod ay Jalaine. Jalaine.
Ano po? Kita na po ba?
Lapit na. Okay, 21 lines of code. So, paano mo ginawa yan?
22 lang. 22 po.
22. Dalawa yung dalawang curly braces. Sige. 4. Tinan mo nga kung masami. Sige, close mo, tapos i-run mo ulit.
Anong input po?
Gawin mong 6. Ayun. Ganun na itsura niya. Okay, thank you.
Thank you po.
Alright, followed by JB.
Kita na po.
Yep. Ayun. So, nag-try ka ng 5. 5 lines of code. Okay, 5 then. You have 19. 19 lines of code. Right. Okay, next, si Yuri.
Ma'am, na-leave po ata si Yuri. Pa-accept daw po siya. Wala.
Di ma'am, nandito na po ako.
Ay, okay.
Okay, Yuri.
Wait lang po ma'am. Ito po ma'am, kita na po.
Ayan, kita na. So, ang haba na ng 43. Sigurado ka? Or patong na lang yan?
Hindi ma'am, print ko lang. Pinomen ko lang.
Okay.
As may lang din po ma'am. Na ano ko lang po sa space.
Okay. Sige. Pa, ano? Paraan?
Ito po ma'am.
Okay, salamat.
Okay. Okay po.
Salamat, Fury. Thank you. Next, si Gerald. Meron pa ba akong hindi naririnig sa inyo? I'm reading the same name. How about the others? Ayan. Okay, so 4. Right. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you po.
Next. Ba't parang tumaas? Okay, Aljon. Aljon next. Okay. Next. Sino nga yung last? Class? Sino nga yung last? Si Aljon. Aljon, anong color number nung nung blue? 1F. Okay. Okay, salamat. O, ayan meron kayong bago. Ayan, dagdag natin. Next, John Victor.
Wait lang po, ma'am.
Okay.
Inaayos po, ma'am.
Mm.
Okay. Ito po yung bino.
So, meron kang 21 lines of code. Sige nga, patingin. Anong output? 4. Ayun. Ayan. Okay. Thank you.
See you.
Next, si Melvin Aquino.
Kita na po, ma'am.
Di pa. Ayan na, malapit na. Ayan. Lumitaw na. Okay. Run mo nga. 25 yung lines of code niya. 4. Ayun. Lumabas. Okay, salamat. Salamat, Melvin. Next, si John Mark. John Mark Mabandos.
Kita na po, ma'am.
Malapit na. Di pa lumilitaw. Ayan. Okay, lumitaw na. So, 24. Sige, run.
Medyo nirevise ko po yung aking, ma'am. Ito po yung magiging output niya.
Okay. Nilagyan mo ng ganyan.
Opo.
Paano mo nilagay ng yung, ano ba to? Asterisk or minus sign?
Ito po, ma'am.
Okay.
Ito po. Ito.
Yun. Isang mahabang ganun. Nag-print F ka lang nun. Okay.
Opo.
Alright. Thank you. Diba?
Sige,
Ginawa
thank
niyo
you po.
talagang super Pasko. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Next. Gabriel. Saklot. Okay. 7. Ayan. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. Next, Rances, Mark. Okay, 4. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Next,
Thank you rin po.
Wilmer. Okay, Wilmer. Thank you. Alright. Thank you. Si Mariton, De Paz. Sige. Run mo. Anong kulay yan? 4F. Orange. Orange yan, diba? Ayan, 4F. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mariton. Pinautan niya ulit yung background niya. Makulay ang life. O, sige. Melody. Tapay. Next. Ayun. Okay. Thank you, Melody. Next, si Dayan. Levi. Oh, ano nangyari dun sa 1?
Ewan ko, ma'am. Ganyan po. Kahit ayusin ko po, naging ganyan lang po siya.
Kasi dahil, most likely dahil
Siguro po mobile lang po kasi.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dayan. Kyla, next. Kyla. Ayan na. Okay. 21 yung lines ng code niya. Tingnan mo sa kabila. Baba mo. Ayan. Ayan. Okay. Diba? Pass ko. Alright. Thank you. Yan yung kay Kyla. Next, si Gian. Gian. Ramon Francisco. Okay, 19 yung lines of code niya. 4. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gian. Next, si Noel. Noel. Ayun. Thank you, Noel. Next, si Jaren.
Wait lang po, ma'am. Yan po, ma'am.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Welcome po, ma'am.
Next, si Erica. Nicole. Okay, naka-mobile din siya. Tingnan nga natin kung mangyayari yung sa katulad sa kanya. Alright. Hindi naman. Teka lang. Nicole, anong gamit mo?
Programming Hero po, ma'am.
Programming Hero. Dayan, ikaw, anong gamit mo?
Programmist po.
Programmist. Okay, siguro pwedeng ganun nga rin yan. Okay. Right, magkaiba sila. Next, Rose Ann Hernan.
Wait lang po.
What? 4? Okay. Paano mo ginawa na green yung ano mo? Color ng font?
08 po.
08. Okay. Ayan. Next, si Rochelle Policarpio. Okay, 4. Ayan. Alright. Thank you. 22 yung lines of code niya. Thank you, Rochelle. Next, si Paulo Belen. Ayun. Okay, so walang encoding sa'yo, diretso. Diretso. Ano yung ano. Okay, salamat, Paulo. Next, si Isaiah Yodi.
Wait po, ma'am.
Blue. Ayun. Okay. Anong color yung blue? 9E? Tama ba? Tama ba? 9E? O ano?
Yes po, ma'am. 9E po.
Okay. Salamat.
Thank you po.
The next, Daniel Molina. Okay, 15. Sige nga, run mo. Ayan. So, wala kang ano, nilagay mo na agad na yung ano. Okay. Right. Thank you. Next, si James Orcales. Okay, 4. Okay. Thank you, James. Next, si Aljon. Simulan na natin pagkatapos nito yung array. Array ko. Ayan. Aljon. Pagkatapos ni Aljon, si Alice, Mark Joseph.
Tapos na po.
Ha? Ano yun?
Wala na tapos na po.
Ah, sige. Ikaw muna. Ikaw naman yung nauna eh.
Tungkol pa po ito sa numbers of flow.
Ano? Ano yun?
Tapos na po ako sa presentation ko po kanina. Nagpasalamat
nauna
lang
ka
po.
na. Okay, nagsalamat ka lang. Okay, sorry. Nawala tuloy ako. Sorry. Okay, Mark Joseph. Alice.
Wait lang po, ma'am. Wait.
Ito yung puti ko. Kukulay nga ako. Sige. Compile. So, hindi yung lines of code. 4. Oh! Parang iba yung dating nun sa'yo. Hindi siya naging hindi siya naging pyramid.
Wait lang po, ma'am. Baka may mali. Check lang po.
Sige, balikan ka namin, ha?
Hindi mo, sandali lang to. Alam mo.
Sige. Oh, baliktad.
Ayan.
Ayun. Tumama rin. Okay. Sige. Thank you. Next. Si Sam Muel Eyara. Nasaan yung ano mo? Ayan. 20 ang lines ng code mo. Okay, thank you. Next, Sophia Marie Cubin. Asa na? Nangyari. May problema yung kay Sophia Bari. Ayan. Okay. Ayan. So, 19. Okay, 4. Ayun. Okay. Done na siya. Thank you, Sophia. Next, si Christina Manuson. Okay, good job. Thank you, Christina. Next, si Edmeline Ibanez. Okay, right. Thank you. Next, si John Victor. The Jack.
Wait lang mo.
Sige.
Okay na po, ma'am.
Teka, di pala militaw. Wala pala. Tagal naman.
Naka-present na po.
Press mo yung area. Yan. Click mo siya. Oh, ba't ka nag-stop presenting?
Kala ko po wala po. Ulitin ko lang po. Ayan po, ma'am. Okay na po.
Di pa. Di ko pa nakikita. I-click mo yung yung...
Ayun po.
Ayan,
Akala ko po
ito
yun.
na.
Akala ko po kasi hindi ba naka...
Ayan. O, di sige, run. Okay. So, may encode ka rin. Okay. Salamat.
Thank you po.
Next. Sino yung next? Ito? Si Joanne Balaka. Shiara. De la Merced. Okay, bago nga. tumatabi ka sa akin, ha? Hindi mo kayang harapin. Salamat, Joanne. Next, si Shiana de la Merced. Huwag mo na ka. Si ano lang yan, may dalang kahon ko talaga. Diba? Sige. 20 yung lines of code niya. Sige, run mo. Run mo, anak. Anong nangyari? Hindi mo ni-run. Tinatawa mo agad. Balik ka siya na. Wala tayong nakitang output. Saan ka na? Run mo. Yan. Okay, 4. Ayun. Okay, thank you. Yun lang. O, diba? Christina Velasco. Ano ka ba? Christina? Thank you! Ayan, di ba? Natapos natin lahat. Right, sakto. Mag-alas 5. Ayan. Okay. So, pwede na nating simulan ang array! Array. Okay. Check ko lang sandali. Ilalabas ko lang yung ating array. Sineso na lang para masaya. Array and strings. Okay. Tapos pagka may sige. Ito tayo kay Neso. Tapos yung playlist niya. Programming C and data stack.
First we have Grammarly.
Hello friends, I'm the instructor here to teach you the subject C programming and data structure.
Huwag mo na maingay dyan, sandali. Hanapin ko pa yung array. Sunod-sunod dyan mahaba-haba yung array na yan. Bumaba ka. Ayaw mo bumaba. Introduction to functions. Ayan na. Lapit na. Recursion. Ayan. Array.
Welcome all. From this lecture onwards, we will start with the basics of arrays, and this is...
Okay. Share ko lang. Okay. So, mag-a-array na tayo. Lapit na tayo sa closing. Ano ko ba? Ay, stop ng sharing. Ayan, stop sharing. Tapos, entire screen. Ayan, nood tayo ha. Medyo marami to. Okay, and then magwa-practice tayo. Alright. Okay, nakikita nyo na yung screen, class?
Yes po.
Okay. Alright. Let's
part
go
1 of basics of arrays. So let's get started. This is the outline of this lecture. First I will give you the definition of array, what array is all about. Then I will make sure that you will understand the definition of array. And then finally I will introduce you to one-dimensional array. So let's get started with the definition of array. An array is a data structure containing a number of data values, all of which are of same type. In order to understand this definition, I will divide this definition into 3 parts. First I will tell you that what a data structure is all about. What is data structure? Data structure is a format for organizing and storing data. It is a format in which you can organize the data Also, you can store the data. Also, each data structure is designed to organize data to suit a specific purpose. For example, an array is a data structure which you can visualize as follows. This is the way you can visualize an array. It's a large chunk of memory divided into smaller blocks of memory, and each block is capable of storing a data value of some type. This is the way you can visualize an array. It's a data structure because here you are storing the data as well as all the data is organized in a sequential manner, right? That is why an array is a data structure. In each block you can store some data of some type, and all of them are organized in a sequential manner. So we can understand that an array is simply a data structure, right? So the first part of this definition is very clear, that an array is a data structure. Let's come to the next part. It contains a number of data values. What does it really mean? This array consists of 10 data values. You can see this array consists of 10 data values, all of which are integers, and each value is stored in a separate block of memory, right? So we can say that an array contains a number of data values. This array contains 10 data values. Similarly, this array contains 5 data values, and again all of which are of integer type. So the second part of the definition is also clear, that an array consists of number of data values, right? Let's come to the third part of this definition, all of which are of same type. Let's try to understand this third part as well. Data type of array elements. This array consists of all integer values, right? And this array consists of all characters. But what about this array? This array consists of characters, integers, floats, but the definition says that all elements must be of same type. So I can say that this is correct, but this is not correct, because the type of all these elements are not same. That is why it is not a correct array. Either an array consists of all integers, either it consists of all characters, all floats, all doubles, or whatever you can imagine, but it is not possible that an array consists of multiple types of elements. Finally, we can say that the definition is clear. An array is a data structure containing a number of data values, all of which are of same type. First of all, it is a data structure, that is a format for organizing and storing data. Also, it consists of number of data values, and all of them must be of same type. It is not the case that one array consists of multiple types of data. It should always consist of data of same type. Now, I will introduce you to one-dimensional array. The simplest form of array one can imagine is one-dimensional array. Let's see how a one-dimensional array looks like. This is how a one-dimensional array looks like. This is already what we have seen, right? So the array that we have already seen is nothing but a one-dimensional array. It is a large chunk of memory, a single row, divided into number of blocks. And each block is capable of storing some data value, right? And all of them must be of same type. You can also imagine a block of memory as a variable and an array as a collection of variables. Now it's up to you how many variables you require in your array and what is going to be the type of the values which you will store in your array. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation.
Medyo madami yung array na yan. Diretso lang yung panood nyo, no?
First we
In the previous lecture, I gave you an introduction to one-dimensional array. It was just an introduction. Therefore, in this lecture, we will continue our discussion on one-dimensional array. So let's get started. There are basically 3 questions we have to address related to one-dimensional array. The first one is how to declare and define one-dimensional array. Then we have to address this question, how to access the array elements. And then we have to answer this question, that how to initialize one-dimensional array. But the focus of this lecture is to understand how to declare and define one-dimensional array. Let's try to answer this question in this lecture. Declaration and definition of one-dimensional array. The syntax of declaring and defining one-dimensional array is like this. First of all, you have to specify the data type, then the name of the array, and then inside these square brackets you have to specify the number of elements. Like for example, an array of integers can be declared as follows. This is the way you can declare an array of integers. You have to specify the data type. Data type of this array is integer. Name of this array is ARR, and number of elements of this array is equals to 5. Right? This is not only the declaration. You're not only declaring the properties of this array, but you're also defining it. When I say you're defining it, it means the compiler will allocate a contiguous block of memory of size equals to 5 into size of integer. Definition means compiler will allocate some memory, and the size of this memory will be 5 into size of integer. Why it is 5 into size of integer? Because this array consists of 5 integers, right? And if I'm saying the size of integer is 4 bytes, then the total size of the memory allocated by the compiler is equals to 5 into 4, which is equals to 20 bytes. Size of integer depends from machine to machine. So I cannot say that it is going to be 4 bytes only. It can be 2 bytes as well. So it depends on machine to machine. But if I'm assuming that size of integer is 4 bytes, then the total size of memory allocated by the compiler will be 5 into 4, which is equals to 20 bytes. Right? Now there is one question for you. Can we specify the length of the array as 5.679? Or can it be of type other than integer? The answer to this question is no. You cannot. The length of an array can be specified by any integer constant expression. It can be any integer constant expression. You can simply write the number of elements, or you can write an expression like this, 5 plus 5, which eventually evaluates to an integer, which is equals to 10. You can also write like this way, 5 into 3, which is equals to 50. Or you can simply declare a variable, and inside these square brackets you can write an expression like this, which eventually evaluates to an integer, right? Because 21 divided by 3 is equals to 7, and 7 is the value which is assigned to this variable, so finally the size is equals to 7. But what about this? Can length be negative? This is not a correct length of array. Length of an array cannot be negative, right? It does not make any sense. Therefore, I can rewrite this statement as the length of an array can be specified by any positive integer constant expression. It must have to be a positive integer. It cannot be a negative integer. Okay? Now let me give you one tip. Specifying the length of an array using macro is considered to be an excellent practice. If you remember, this is the way we can specify the macro, right? This is the way we can specify macro. And specifying the length of an array using macro is considered to be the best practice. But why? We will see why in the next lecture. In the outline of the previous lecture, I already gave you 3 questions to address in order to understand the basics of arrays. I've already discussed this first question, that how to declare and define one-dimensional array. In this lecture, we will consider this question, that is, how to access the array elements. So let's get started. Accessing elements from 1D array. To access an array element, just write array name followed by square brackets, and inside these square brackets you have to specify the index. Suppose you have an array of length equals to 5. then as we know, index starts from 0, the last index of this array will be 4. Because if length is equals to 5, then last index of the array must be 4. It's always length minus 1. So index starts from 0 and goes up to 4. If you want to access the first element of an array, you can access that element by specifying the index as 0. Here you have to write the name of the array, then you have to write the square brackets, and then you have to specify the index. Now, if you want to access the second element of an array, you have to specify the index as 1. And if you want to access the third element of the array, then you have to specify the index 2. And so on. One thing you should always remember is that index always starts from 0 and goes up to length minus 1. The length that I am talking about is the length of the array. This is all about accessing the array elements. Now we have understood clearly that how we can access the array elements. Now the third question that we have to address is how to initialize one-dimensional array. We will discuss this question in the upcoming lecture. Okay?
So, one-dimensional.
If you remember, in the previous lecture, I already gave you a tip. Specifying the length of an array using macro is considered to be an excellent practice, right? If you specify the length of an array using macro, then it is always considered to be the best practice. This is the way you define a macro, right? You definitely asked me this question, that why it is considered to be the best practice. We will see why right now. In this program, as you can see, I am not specifying the macro. I basically want to differentiate between the programs in which I am going to use macro and the programs in which I am not going to use macro. Inside this main function, I have declared an array and the length of this array is 10. I want to run this for loop from 0 to 9 so that I can input total 10 elements from the user inside this array. After this for loop, there is one more for loop where I just want to print all the 10 elements of the array. This program is without macro. Suppose in future I want to ask user to enter 15 elements in this array. It is not possible to enter 15 elements in this array because the length of this array is 10. I can change this to 15 in order to allow 15 elements to be entered inside this array. Not only that, I have to make change over here as well. And I have to make change over here as well, right? This way I can allow 15 elements to be entered inside this array, right? If your code is large, then making those changes everywhere will be cumbersome. In order to eliminate this disadvantage, we can use macros. Let's see how macros can be useful in order to eliminate this disadvantage. Here is the program with macro. This is how I am defining a macro. And instead of writing the length directly, I have specified the name of the macro, right? Which is n. I have also specified n over here and n over here. Now suppose in future I want my user to enter 15 elements in this array. The length of this array must be at least 15. Therefore, I just have to make a small change over here. I am going to change this to 15. Just making a change over here will automatically make changes over here, right? There is no need to update the length over here, and over here. You just have to make change over here and automatically the change will happen everywhere where you're using the macro, right? That is why macro is considered to be the best practice whenever you are specifying the length of an array. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation.
Okay. Meron pa nga nun, multi-dimensional, kaya makakahaba yan. Diretso lang ha. Message.
In the previous two lectures, I have already discussed these two questions, that is, how to declare and define one-dimensional array and how to access the array elements. In this lecture, I am going to discuss this question, that is, how to initialize one-dimensional array. So let's get started. There are basically 4 methods I am going to discuss with you in order to initialize one-dimensional array. And here is method number 1. This is the way you can initialize one-dimensional array. Here there is no need to specify the data type if this array is already declared somewhere else. If this array is not declared before, then you have to specify the data type. Also, the length I have specified over here is 5. Therefore, it can accept maximum to maximum 5 elements, and here are those 5 elements. These elements are comma separated, and you have to enter these elements inside these flower brackets. Okay? Obviously, this element will go in index 0, this element will go in index 1, this element will go in index 2, and so on. Now let me give you method number 2. This method is considered to be better in comparison with this method. What is the reason behind that? Here, there is no need to specify the length. Both are exactly the same, but you can also write this without specifying the length. There is one advantage of not specifying the length. You can add as many elements you want. It is much better in comparison to this. Okay? Now let me discuss method number 3. And here is how it looks like. You are first declaring the array, and here in this case you have to specify the length. Okay? This is the only case where there is no requirement of specifying the length, but here in this case you have to specify the length. Otherwise it will produce an error. Now here one by one in these indexes I am entering these elements. This is another way of initialization. Now let me discuss method number 4 with you. And here is how it looks like. You are first declaring the array, and then inside this for loop you are accepting inputs from the user with the help of this scanf function. Those inputs will get entered inside this array one by one. This for loop runs from 0 to 4 because the size that I have specified over here is 5. All these methods are correct, but this is not considered to be a preferred method because it is quite cumbersome to mention all these indexes and then one by one entering elements in these indexes. It is quite cumbersome, right? That is why I will not prefer this method. Again, writing in this way is also not a preferred one. Instead of this, you can write in this way. Okay? Now it's time to introduce my friend Ronnie, who is a software engineer in XYZ company. He is here to ask us one question. Hey, what happens if I accidentally add less number of elements than the length specified? Let me reframe this question. What if number of elements are lesser than the length specified? That is something like this. You have specified the length as 10, but you are entering only 6 elements. What happens to the rest of the locations? The answer to this question is, the remaining locations of the array are filled by value 0. This means something like this. As you have specified the length as 10 and you have entered only 6 elements, therefore the rest of the locations will get filled by value 0. So if length is greater than the elements you have entered, then the rest of the locations will automatically be filled by value 0. Okay? Now let me give you a small tip. Instead of writing in this way, you can also write this. Here I am entering value 0 one by one from index 0 to 9. Instead of writing this whole code, you can simply write this line. Both are exactly the same. As we know, whenever we are entering the elements lesser than the length specified, automatically the rest of the locations are filled by value 0. Here I am specifying just one value 0. Rest of the entries will automatically get filled by 0. So this is an advantage. This is not a preferred method, but this one is preferred. Okay? But why not I can write in this way without even specifying the single element? Because this is illegal. You must have to specify at least one element. It cannot be completely empty. And it is also illegal to add more elements than the length of an array. You cannot write something like this. Here you are specifying the length as 5, but you are entering total 6 elements. This is illegal. You cannot add more number of elements than the length specified. Now here is a quick recap of this lecture. If the number of elements are lesser than the length of the array, then the rest of the locations are automatically filled by value 0. Easy way to initialize an array with all zeros is given by this. This is the easiest way of initializing the array with all zeros. At the time of initialization, never leave these flower brackets empty. These flower brackets, you should never leave them empty, and also never exceed the limit of number of elements specified by the length of an array. This is not allowed, and this is also not allowed. You should not exceed the limit, that is, the length specified, and you should not leave these flower brackets empty. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation. We will continue our discussion on initialization of one-dimensional arrays, and in this lecture we will try to understand what is designated initializers. So let's get started. Sometimes we want something like this. Like at certain positions we want to fill values other than zeros, and to the rest of the positions we want to fill all zeros. One day I was thinking that how great it would be if I don't have to explicitly write these zeros. Obviously I want to ease my task, right? Therefore I want these zeros to be automatically filled, like we have already seen in the previous lecture. Whenever we have elements lesser than the length of the array, then the rest of the positions will automatically get filled by zeros. But as you can see, these non-zero elements are not in a sequence. They are at certain positions. Up till now we haven't seen any method in which these positions will automatically get filled by 0 whenever these non-zero elements are not in a sequence, right? Let's see if there is some method to do this or not. What we want basically, we want 1 in position 0, as you can see, 2 in position 5, 3 in position 6, right? And we want that rest of the positions will automatically get filled by 0 according to the length, right? To do this, we have to write something like this. Okay? This way of initialization is called designated initialization, and each number in the square brackets is said to be a designator. This is nothing but an index, right? And this is the value you want to store in that particular index. As I want 1 in position 0, therefore I have to write something like this. Square brackets, the index, this is called designator, and equal to sign, and then the element that you want to store in that particular index. At 5th position, I want to place value 2, and at 6th position, I want to place value 3, right? There are certain advantages of this way of initialization. There is no need to bother about the entries containing zeros. If suppose we have an array like this, in which there are numerous number of zeros, and only at 2 positions we have values other than zeros, then you can simply write this array like this. It is much compact and much easy way of writing than this. Clever, isn't it? There is one more advantage of designated initialization. There is no need to even bother about the order at all. That is, these two are same. You can write like this way or you can shuffle them. You can also place this designator first. There is no problem at all. Okay? This is also considered to be an advantage of designated initialization. Now, be careful that if the length of an array is n, then each designator must be between 0 and n minus 1. This is quite obvious that if length is n, then index, as we know, goes from 0 to n minus 1. The maximum index possible is n minus 1 and the minimum index possible is 0, right? And designator is also an index. For example, suppose we have an array like this, then you can write this designator or this designator, there is no problem. This is correct. But you cannot write something like this. This is wrong. Because of this index, this is wrong. Now there is one question, that what if I won't mention the length? In that case, designators could be any non-negative integer. Okay? And compiler will deduce the length of the array from the largest designator in the list. Compiler will deduce the length in that case. You can mention as many designators you want, and compiler will deduce the length of the array from the largest designator. Like for example, we have something like this. In this case, you are not mentioning the length over here, and you are simply specifying the designators as much as you want. You can see that this is the largest designator over here, so compiler will deduce that the length of this array will be 50. Because of this designator, maximum length of this array would be 50. As this is the index and this is the largest index, therefore the length of this array will be 50 because it is always largest index plus 1, right? Finally, no one can stop you from doing this. You can mix both the traditional way of initialization and designated initialization. You can mix both of them. We can say that this array is equivalent to this array. Obviously, at position 0, 1 will be placed, at position 1, 7 will be placed, at position 2, 5 will be placed, and at position 3 and 4, automatically zeros will get placed, and then at position 5, as it is indicated by this designator, 90 will be placed, and then at position 6, 6 will be placed, and so on, right? But if there is a clash, then designated initializer will win. You can clearly see that at position 2, value 3 is stored, right? But there is one designator 2 as well, which says that at this position, 4 must be stored. Then in that case, designator will win. This means this array is equivalent to this array. At position 2, 4 will get stored, not 3. Okay? Now here is one good news for you. We have covered all these 3 questions successfully. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation.
Teka lang puputulin ko lang. Meron lang pala akong nakalimutang i-discuss bago maubos yung oras natin. Hindi ko lang kung nabigay ko na to sa inyo kasi nagagawa na kayo ng project para ma-ahead na kayo finalize. Okay. C program to convert to exe file. Nabigay ko na ba sa inyo na paano gagawing executable file yung yung programming, yung mga app nyo? Nabigay ko na ba yon? Hindi pa. Hindi pa. Okay. So, ibig sabihin doon sa kabila ko nabigay. Okay. Kasi ito yung pang finalize, no? Actually, tuturo ko to sa dulo since ginagawa nyo na, tas nagsasubmit na kayo, might as well mag-ahead, na lang kayo, no? So, okay. Ayan, eto. Okay, so panoorin nyo to. Ilalagay ko siya sa GC para pwede nyo nang gawin yung mga natapos nyo, gawin nyo silang exe file. Yun yung finalization nya, no? Yun yung ending, which is supposedly sa dulo ko ituturo. But anyway, since nandyan na, tuturo ko pa rin sa dulo, pero yung mga nakagawa na kasi ng ahead sa inyo, di pwede na kayong mag-advance. I-advance nyo na para hindi sayang yung oras. So, ayan, nilagay ko sa GC. Okay? How to convert the CPP file to exe file. Ayan. So, para magiging executable na yung file na yung ginawa nyong app. Ayan. Okay. Tuloy na natin to. Ayan. Okay.
First, we have grammar.
In this lecture, we will try to understand one program to reverse a series of numbers. So let's get started. Write a program to print the following numbers in reverse order. We want to print these numbers in reverse order. That means this number should come first, this number should come second, this number should come third, this number should come fourth, and so on. Assume that all these numbers are stored in an array. Okay? Before starting up with this program, I would encourage you to pause the video for a while and try to answer this question on your own. I hope you're done. Okay. Let's see how we can write a program to print these numbers in reverse order. Obviously, we require a main function to start our program, right? And inside this main function, I'm declaring an array and also I'm initializing this array with these values. Okay? These are all integers, that's why the data type must be integer. Also, the length must be 9 because there are total 9 numbers in this list. This is the original list which we have seen in our question, right? After that, we require one variable, that is I, which is required in our for loop. Okay? First of all, I would like to print these numbers, and then after that, I will print the reverse of these numbers. Okay? So, in order to print these numbers in original order, I require a for loop that will run from 0 to 8, right? And it will print all these numbers in original order. That means starting from 0, it will print A0 first, that means this element, then it will print A1, then A2, then A3, then A4, and so on. This for loop helps us in printing these numbers in original order. After this, I require this /n. This will print the new line. Means, after printing this original order, we have to print the reverse order. Both original order and reverse order should not come in the same line. That's why I require this new line. Okay? Then, I am going to print the elements in reverse order. If we want to print the reverse order, then we have to start from index 8. Isn't that so? Because this is the last element and this should come first. Therefore, we have to start from index 8. Then we have to decrease the index 8 by 1 in order to get 7. Then again we have to decrease the index by 1 in order to get 6 and so on. This is quite clear that I must be 8 initially, and instead of increment operator, it must be decrement operator, right? What about the condition checking? What should be the condition? Condition cannot be I less than 9, right? In this case, I is less than 9 because when it reaches 8, it has to stop. Here, when it reaches 0, it has to stop, right? Therefore, condition must be I greater than or equals to 0. Simple. You are starting from 8, right? You are decrementing it one by one. This means from 8 you will reach to 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, and finally we reach to 0, right? When it reaches 0, it has to stop. This means when I becomes 0, it has to print that value, and then after that, it has to exit from the for loop. So it is quite clear that how our for loop looks like. It will run from I equals to 8 to 0, okay? And whatever is there inside this for loop is same as this for loop. Now let's execute this code to see whether this program runs fine or not. Yes, it works fine. This is the original list and this is the reversed list. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation.
First, we have.
In this lecture, we will try to understand how we can write a program to find repeated digits in a number. So let's get started.
So
write a program to check whether
this is another array in C program, no? So meron tayong isa-solve na program.
any of the digits in a number appears more than once. Like for example, suppose user inputs this number 67827. We need to identify whether any of the digits in this number appears more than once or not. As we can clearly see, 7 appears more than once, therefore the output must be yes. I would encourage you to pause the video for a while and try to write a program to perform this task. I hope you're done. Okay. Now let's try to understand how we can write a program to check whether any of the digits in a number appears more than once. I'm going to divide my program into 3 parts in order to understand it in a better way. And here is part number 1. I have declared an array scene of length 10 and the data type of this array is integer. And I have initialized this array with value 0. This means all the locations of this array must contain value 0. This means something like this. Obviously, it is just a small chunk of this array. The question that immediately arises is that why I want to initialize this array with value 0. Let me explain this with the help of an example. Suppose user inputs this number 23 and I need to find out whether this number contains any repeated digit or not. In order to do that, I have to traverse each and every digit of this number, right? Now we know already that digits can be between 0 to 9 only. Whenever I find out a digit, I will go to the particular index corresponding to that digit. That means if I find 3, then I will go to index 3 and I will replace this 0 by 1. 1 means I have seen the digit and 0 means I have not seen the digit before. Now you can understand why I have mentioned the length as 10, because there are total 10 digits possible from 0 to 9, right? And whenever I find out a digit, I will go to that particular index and I will replace value 0 by 1. That is why the name itself suggests seen. Whenever you find out a digit, you will replace 0 by 1. And if you haven't seen that digit before, then it is already filled by value 0. Initially, no input is given by the user. Therefore, all the locations must contain value 0. This means I have not seen any digit yet. This record is important to maintain because it helps us in finding out whether I have seen the digit before or not. If I have seen the digit before, then it simply means that that digit is repeated. And I will simply stop my program and say yes, I have seen the repeated digit in a number. Now, after understanding this part 1 of the program, let's try to understand part number 2. This is the main code of this program, the main logic. N depicts the value which is entered by the user. Let's suppose user inputs 23, then N contains value 23. Now as 23 is greater than 0, therefore condition is satisfied and we will come inside this while loop. And we will simply divide this number 23 by 10 and we will store the remainder inside rem variable. Why this step is required? Because it helps us in getting the last digit of this number. That is why I am dividing this number by 10. Okay? So when I divide 23 by 10, it gives me remainder 3. And I will store this remainder inside rem variable. Then, as we can see, we have an if construct. And inside this if construct, we are checking this condition. Is seen rem equals to 1 or not? This means, have you seen this digit before? Seen 3 means I will go to that particular index and I will take the value which is stored inside this location. Here we can see we have value 0 and 0 is not equals to 1. Therefore the condition is not satisfied. This simply means I have not seen this digit before, right? As the condition is not satisfied, therefore this statement will not execute and hence we will land at this point. Here this line means that replace this value 0 by 1. Go to the third index and replace the value that is stored in that particular location by 1. After this step, we have another step which says we need to divide that number by 10 and store the number inside n. This means I will divide 23 by 10 and 23 by 10 will leave the quotient 2 and that 2 will get stored inside n variable. I will again check this condition. Again this condition is satisfied and I will divide this 2 by 10 and store the remainder inside the rem variable. Remainder now comes out to be 2. That is this digit, right? Now I will check whether I have seen this digit before or not. I have not seen this digit before, therefore the condition is not satisfied and hence I will land at this point. This means I will replace this value 0 by 1. because I have seen this digit now, right? I will divide this digit by 10, which gives me the quotient 0, and it will get stored inside this n variable. 0 is not greater than 0, hence we come outside of this while loop. Now this is clear that when n is equals to 0, then it means that we have traversed all the digits and we simply come out of this loop without seeing any repeated digit. Now after understanding this part of code, let's now dive into the part number 3. In this code, we can clearly observe there are basically two cases we need to address.
Class, hanggang alas tayo? Alas 6? O 6:30? Class.
Alas 6 lang po.
Alas
6 po.
Okay.
6 po.
Sige. May magre-remind sa akin, ano?
Opo, ma'am.
Okay.
First is when n is greater than 0 and we simply break out of this loop. When n is greater than 0 and you have encountered a digit which you have already seen, then you simply break out of this loop, right? And the previous case that we have seen is when n becomes 0 and we come out of this loop. We already know when n is equals to 0, it indicates that we have not seen any repeated digit. But what happens when n is greater than 0 and we break out of this loop? This means we have seen the digit already. That is why with the help of this break statement, I am coming out of this loop. Let's consider one example in which we have seen the digit and in that case n is greater than 0. Suppose user inputs this number 1232. Now initially I will divide this number by 10 and store the remainder inside rem variable. I will divide this number by 10 and it gives me remainder 2. 2 is the last digit of this number, right? Now I will check whether I have seen this digit before or not. I have not seen this digit before, right? Therefore this condition is not satisfied and hence I will replace this value 0 by 1 because now I have seen this digit. Again I will divide this number by 10. Now this time I will store the quotient inside n. It gives me the quotient 123 after dividing by 10. I will again check this condition. Is 123 is greater than 0? Yes, it is greater than 0. Therefore I will come inside this while loop and divide 123 by 10. It gives me the remainder 3. That is the second last digit. Now I will check whether I have seen this digit before or not. I have not seen this digit before. Therefore, I will replace this by 1 according to this line. Now I will again divide this number by 10 and store the quotient inside variable n, which is equals to 12. Now 12 is again greater than 0, right? And I will divide 12 by 10 and store the remainder. It gives me remainder 2. Now I will check whether I have seen this digit before or not. Yes, I have seen this digit as indicated over here. As rem is equals to 2 and seen 2 means I will go to that particular location and access the value that is stored in that location, which is equals to 1. And 1 is equals to 1, right? That means I have seen this digit before. Now as condition is satisfied, therefore with the help of this break statement we come outside of this loop. And you can clearly see that n is also greater than 0. This is always the case. When you are breaking out of this loop in between, then this is always the case that n is greater than 0. It is clear from this fact that when n is greater than 0 and you are coming out of this loop, this means that you have seen the repeated digits in a number and hence the output must be yes. And when n is equals to 0 and you are coming out of this loop, this means that you haven't seen any repeated digit in a number, right? And you must output no, okay? Now let me give you the final part 3 code. If n is greater than 0, then we must print yes. Otherwise, we will print no. Now let me combine all the 3 parts and execute them to know whether our code works fine or not. I have specifically mentioned all the parts of this particular program. This is part 1, this is part 2, and this is part 3. And here, there are 2 extra lines in which I am asking the user to enter the number. Rest of the code is same as what we have seen already. Okay? Now let's execute this code. Let's suppose we enter the number 67854. It says no, which is correct. Let's execute this code once again. And this time I'm entering the number 6756. It says yes. 6 is repeated over here. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation. In this presentation, we will learn how to use size of operator with arrays. So let's get started. Let me ask you one question. How many elements are there in this array? After taking 2 or 3 minutes, you can answer this question, right? But let me apply the same question to this array as well. Can you answer this? How many elements are there in this array?
No.
I know. You are angry on me, right? But don't worry. Size of operator is here to rescue. With the help of this sentence, you would be able to calculate how many elements are there in that array and any array. Okay? You just have to specify the name of the array inside size of operator, and you also have to specify name of array along with square brackets and the index inside the size of operator. And then you have to divide both. Okay? I can explain this why this works. But in order to explain this, I'm going to divide this sentence into 2 parts. This is going to be the first part and this is going to be the second part. Okay? Let me explain the first part and then the second part, and then I will combine both of them together in order to understand why this works. Okay? Let me explain the first part to you. Size of name of array. Suppose we have an array like this and there are total 10 elements in this array. What is the size of this array? There are total 10 integers, right? And I'm assuming that each integer requires 4 bytes. Then we can easily calculate the size of this array by multiplying 4 with 10. It gives me 40 bytes. We already know size of operator gives you the size in bytes, and as we are assuming that each integer requires 4 bytes, and there are total 10 integers in this array, therefore the size of this array is going to be 4 into 10, which is equals to 40 bytes, right? So, this is clear. Let me explain the second part to you. Size of name of array along with square brackets and the index. What does it really mean? I'm taking the same array which consists of 10 elements. What is the meaning of size of A0? A0 means first element, right? And because it is an integer and we are assuming size of this integer is 4 bytes, therefore we know size of this element will be 4 bytes, right? So the second part of this sentence is also clear. Size of A we already know it is 40 bytes in this case, and size of A0 is 4 bytes. In order to calculate how many elements are there in this array, we need to divide 40 by 4, which gives me 10, which is the correct answer. But why this works? In order to calculate size of whole array, we need to multiply size of one array element with number of elements. Isn't that so? If we want to calculate number of elements, we need to divide size of whole array by size of one array element. And that is what we are doing here, right? Size of name of array means size of whole array. And size of name of array with square brackets and the index means size of one array element. And you are dividing both of them in order to calculate the number of elements. For the sake of simplicity, I'm mentioning 0 over here. You can mention 1, 2, 3, 4. It is up to you. And why the index doesn't matter? Because we just want to know size of one element. And it can be any element of the array. But better is to choose 0. Now with the help of the code, let's see whether this sentence helps us in calculating the number of elements or not. Here you can see the array that we have seen in the first slide, right? With the help of this printf function, we want to print the number of elements that are contained in this array. And we can calculate the number of elements with the help of this sentence. Size of A divided by size of A0. Okay, let's execute this code now. Okay, there are total 152 elements in this array. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this presentation.
Ulitin ko lang yung yung instruction ko doon sa Naintindihan nyo ba yung sinabi ko na yung video na to, kung tapos na yung app na ginawa ninyo, pwede nyo nang i-finalize. Anong ibig sabihin ng finalization? Pwede mo na siyang gawing executable, exe file. So, yung mga isasubmit nyo, kung kukompletuhin nyo na, meron kayong documentation, tapos sa documentation, may 3 files na naandoon yung inyong flowchart, yung inyong instruction manual, yan yung process kung paano gamitin yung app ninyo, at yung code, no? So, dalawa yung i-expect ko na natin, no? I-submit. Now, yung app ninyo, pwede nyo na siyang gawing executable file para ma-submit nyo na. So, yun yung finalize na project. Naintindihan po ba? Class. Siguro yung mga nag-programming na before naintindihan ako. Pero yung hindi pa nagpo-program, okay. Sana na-gets nyo yung ibig ko sabihin. Kasi pandulo natin to magsasubmit na kayo ng project. So, pwede kayong mag-ahead ng learning. Okay. Sino to? Si Orcales.
Sinend ko lang po. Papacheck lang po kung tama.
Okay. Teka lang. Balik tayo dito.
Wait lang, may klase pa ako.
Okay. So, naintindihan po ba yung sinasabi ko? Doon sa ating, etong video na to. Eto, sinend ko na ng maaga kasi nagagawa na kayo ng mga requirements. Then, you might as well finalize your app para isang bitaw na lang, no? Hindi na kailangan balikan. Hindi pa ulit-ulit yung pagsasubmit. No? Okay. Question. Wala nagre-react. Pag wala nagre-react sa inyo, medyo kinakabahan ako parang hindi ata nag-gets yung sinasabi ko, kaya inuulit ko. Mag-react naman. Naintindihan ba?
Good sumama po.
Okay. May nag-isang nag-react. Paano yung iba?
Yes, ma'am.
Ayaw.
Yes po.
Yes po.
Yes, P.
Okay. So, okay, mag-aalas 6 na. Siguro, pili tayo. Magbibigay ako ng gagawin nyo sa para magamit natin yung ating inaral sa array. Bibigay ako ng pwede nyong gawin. Ayan. Array. Ayan yung susunod array. Okay. Pili tayo ng teka. Okay. Sineso. Pag pwede nyo namang hanapin si programming arrays and string. Lilitaw yung ating sa choices si Neso Academy, no? So, makikita nyo yung mga array na diniscuss niya. So, pwede nyo nang i-search na lang kung gusto nyo pakinggan ulit yung sinabi nitong si Kuya. Wait. Okay, dito tayo. Pipili lang ako ng pwede nyong gawin take home. Ayan. Para useful naman yung pagpapanood natin. Right. Okay, maganda. Marami yung sinabi niyang yung best practice. Lalo na kasi, yung kasi, nested yun pag nest ng ng value, no? Para pagka may shortcut, yun yung ginagamit, no? Para hindi, para maayos yung coding, no? Meron pa siyang sinabi yung sa macro. Best practice din yun, no? Para hindi pa ulit-ulit, pwede nyo na lang. Yan. Pero kasi, paano pagka yung ang concern ko lang dun sa define macro na sinabi niya is, paano pagka hindi naman, halimbawa, magtaglagay ka ng bagong array dun sa susunod na code mo, then, siguro useful yan kung iisa lang yung array na gagamitin, no? Minsan kasi kailangan mo ng several declaration ng array. Okay. So, ano pa magandang ipa-take home sa inyo? Simulan natin dito sa 3. Ayan. Number 3. Write a program to find the sum of all elements of the array. Ayan. No? O, sige, bago natin ay mag-sample muna tayo. Para mayroon tayong Ito, magpiprint, read and print elements of an array, no? So, yan yung kanyang C program na gagawin, no? Write a program in C to store elements in an array and print it. So, ipiprint siya. So, ito yung pictorial presentation. Okay, tama-tama, may oras pa ako, no? Yan yung array elements. Okay. A1 hanggang 5. O, yun sinasabi ko eh. Pag nag-define ka ng macro, isa lang yung nilagay mo doon. So, paano pagka may iba kang array? Katulad nito, no? 5 iba-ibang array yan, no? Okay. So, ito yung ano niya, code niya, no? So, meron tayo ditong, ito yung array. Naka-specify yung elements 10. Okay. Naka-int din siya. Ito yung ating variable I. Ito yung printf. Pag na-read yung elements, tapos may guhit, no? And then, input 10 elements in the array. Ito yung ating for loop. Okay. So, meron tayong initialization dito. Comparison, and then update. Ayan. And then, print element, %d, yun sa value ng I. Pag na-achieve na yung, ano nito, no? Yung I is less than 10, no? Scanf siya, and then, yung array. Array na I, no? Printf, and then, ayan, ito. So, meron pa isang, another for loop dito. Ayan. And then, ayan, printf yung array I. No? Okay. Tingnan nga natin yung output. Isa lang yung ano niya eh, no? Isa lang yung pinakita niya. Ito yung ano, flowchart. Flowchart nito. Yes? Oras na. Oo nga, oras na. Ipapakita ko lang yung output nito para makita natin, no? Yan. O, sige. Hindi na ako magbibigay ng take home. Inaabot ako. Pinutol ko na nga. Inabot pa ako. Okay. Napakita ko lang yung ano nito para makita natin output. Then, nasabi ko na 3, diba? Kaso, i-explain ko pa, no? Array. Teka, save lang natin to. Salamat, Yuri. Array 1. Array ko. Okay, save. Save natin. Meron ba tayong i-encode? Ano sabi dito? Ano sabi? Ano raw yung 10, diba? Tama ba? Teka. Nagkang nga. 10 nga. 10 yung elements. Sige. 10. Ay, ano ba yun? 9. Ay. Sorry. Mali pala. 0. Dapat 1. 1. 2. 3. Hanggang kailan to? Teka. Hanggang 9. O, sige. Konti na lang. 4. 5. 6. 7, 8, 9. Ano pinindot ko? Mali. 9. Okay. Ayun. Ipalito natin. Kaso na, naging, yung 1 dapat, yung 10 dapat 1. Tumitaw tuloy 10 din dito, no? So, yan yung ano. Okay, class. Hindi ko na ibibigyan ng take home. Okay. Pero gawin nyo na yung mga projects nyo. Gawin nyo na, i-finalize nyo na. No? Okay. Teka lang ha. Kukunan ko kayo ng picture. O, sige. Para sa attendance. Sige, sandali lang. Stop presenting. Okay. Yan mga mukha natin. Labas na natin, no? Yung ating mga naggagwapuhan at naggaganda ang mga face. Ayan. Okay. Madali. Asan yung kay, Edna Lynn? Ayun. Ayan. Si, Joanne, Balaka, picture. Daniel, Molina, Shiana. O, tinatago na kayo. Jalaine, ano yan, naka-icon ka pa rin. O, Joanne, ano na? De La Merced. Okay. Kukuha na ako. Alright. 1, 2, 3. Smile. O, diba? 1, 2, 3. One more time. Okay, one more time. Smile. Okay, salamat po. Oh, maliwanag yung instruction dun sa ano ha, sa executable file ng inyong app ha. Okay.
Okay po, ma'am.
Sige, nantok na si John Vector. Okay,
Ma'am,
bye-bye ma'am.
pinag-roll ka na, sorry ako yun. Bigla nag-open mic.
lang. Ganun talaga ang live.
Thank you,
Minsan
ma'am.
maingay.
Thank you,
Kahit
ma'am.
hindi.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Ingat tayo palagi.
Bye.
Ingat palagi. Okay. Teka, isasarado ko lang ang ating recording. Done.